So Tim is the founding partner of a leading venture capital firm, Draper Associates and DFJ. He was an early investor in companies including Skype, Tesla, Hotmail, and Theranos. Tim was also one of the earliest venture capitalists in Silicon Valley to invest in cryptocurrencies and blockchain technologies. He made investments in key companies in Coinbase, Bancorp. He's been recognized as a top venture capitalist by Forbes and made the list of top 50 most outstanding Harvard alumni. He graduated with a BS in electrical engineering from Stanford and an MBA from Harvard. So it's a very illustrious career. We have a lot of questions for him. I'll let Elizabeth take it away.
So Tim, thank you very much for joining us today at the Harvard Law School's first annual Blockchain, Fintech, The Law Conference. We're so excited to have you today, and we are Harvard Law students Elizabeth Ferrie and Amy Zhang, and we'll be co-moderating this discussion today. We have allocated 30 minutes.
And I'm glad I'm the first one. I like being.
So we've allocated 30 minutes to Q&A with you, followed by 15 minutes for audience questions. And since this is Harvard Law School, we thought the conversation should center around laws and regulations pertaining to the cryptocurrency industry. So we'll dive right into the first question. You have a very optimistic outlook about cryptocurrencies, seeing their potential to disrupt fiat currencies, and recently reiterating your prediction that Bitcoin prices will rise to $250,000 by 2022. You even released a rap song called Bitcoin Hustle recently. But government regulation obviously plays a huge role in shaping the future growth potential of the cryptocurrency industry. So what are your views on the U.S. government's current approach to regulation, and what are the pitfalls to their regulatory approach?
Well, that's actually interesting. I'm looking forward to meeting with one of the top SEC guys because here's what I've seen out there. It's a very interesting time. First, we've got this new technology, and technology wins all the wars. When England beat France, when France beat Italy, whatever, all those wars were all won with technology. It was gunpowder once. Star Wars was how we won the Cold War. Whatever. It's always technology. And with technology, there is a new technology that has the potential to transform society, to move it to a higher plane, where we used to be all sort of tied to these tribes, this fiefdoms, and they were tied to these geographic borders. And now all of a sudden there are these technologies that are transcending those borders, and Bitcoin was the first of those, and Bitcoin suddenly got all of us starting to think about decentralization, which means you can actually operate in a higher ethereal plane, and people can operate kind of as in a virtual way as well as being at the physical level. And if that's the case, then governments have to kind of reinvent themselves. They've all been tied to tribalism. They've all been tied to geographic border. And now Estonia has broken rank and put out the Estonian virtual residency card, which all of you can go get. The Prime Minister of Estonia I'm the third virtual resident of Estonia. But, and then he told me, this was the previous Prime Minister, he told me that just by doing digital signatures, he saved 2% of the GDP. And when and then digital voting, all the young people started to vote. Things really started to change. His digital society has become a model for other people's other countries. And then he started to think outside of his country. And by doing so, he is actually making it so that we can be sort of virtual citizens of the world. A lot of what government does is is an insurance policy. And insurance now can be done on a smart contract on the blockchain with Bitcoin, and we can all be well insured. And what does government do? Like 80% of what government does is insurance. And so a lot of that can be done across border. And so now I'm starting to think that governments are going to compete with one another for you, for all the great minds of the world, for all the capital of the world, all the citizens of the world, all the businesses of the world. They're going to have to compete. And so my message to our government is, hey, you are in competition. And now you got into what's happening in crypto. Well, what's interesting, the Chinese government clamped it down. They said, no crypto, we're cutting it off. And they lost Binance. Binance went first to Singapore and then to Malta. And that was a $10 billion crypto company. And then they lost a whole bunch of entrepreneurs who said, wait, everything I'm doing is crypto. How am I going to do a better job of this? And then Japan was very clever. They said, we're going to make Bitcoin a national currency. And it was like an alert to the world. We're making Bitcoin a national currency. Here's how you do an ICO in Japan. Here's how it's made legal. Go. And what they're basically saying is, you young entrepreneurs who are making the world move, who are like feeling cramped in China, come to Japan and you can do much more. So what I would say to the US government is pretty much the same thing. Start thinking outside of whatever laws we had in 1933 and 1940 that were there to protect widows and orphans, because you are penalizing the orphans right now. The orphans are the 20-something-year-olds who are trying to make a living, and all of a sudden there's this new technology and they can build a whole economy around it, and you are restricting that. So be careful how restrictive you are, because what you're telling two people who are creating an ICO in their garage, you have to do all the same things to regulate that this company that's $10 billion and has 100,000 employees has to do. So you're really damaging the growth in the country by putting all of these like antiquated rules on this new technology. And the other thing is that you're losing technologies because we tried to do an airdrop here for a party that I threw. I was going to do a big airdrop, and we were going to airdrop tokens, and a whole bunch of these guys who had created new tokens were all excited about doing an airdrop. Well, we checked with our lawyer and they said, you can't do this because it would be promoting a security, and that's illegal. You can't promote your security. It's a public thing. And I thought, oh my God, airdrops could be used for so many things. Here's a great example. Let's say that the US government wants to give aid right now to Venezuela. Well, what do? They have to go through the president, and he's totally corrupt, and he's just going to put it all in his pocket. And none of it's going to get down, even if like they force the guy to build a power plant or something. He's not going to help out all those people down there. Well, the U.S. government could buy a bunch of Bitcoin, do a big airdrop in Venezuela, and all of the Venezuelans could start their economy right there on their smartphone. But if we are making airdrops not legal, we're going to lose out. We were really bright. The U.S. was so bright to just let the internet run for a while without too much regulation. They just kind of let it run. And so all those internet entrepreneurs came from all over the world to the Silicon Valley and other parts of the U.S., and they were able to run freely and build their businesses freely. And we were the biggest beneficiary, the U.S., biggest beneficiary of the internet of any country in the world, even though some countries went from 0 to 60. We went from 60 to 500 because all of that innovation and everything came here and started here. Well, if we push the airdroppers away, or we push whatever away by adding more regulation, we are going to lose all that innovation to a country that says, bring it here.
Okay, I sort of wanted to take then the opposite stance. So you've been very well known for being extremely enthusiastic about blockchain technologies and about cryptocurrencies. Tomorrow our conference is
about Bitcoin.
About
Bitcoin, because it brings on the blockchain and it brings on the smart contract.
Right.
Bitcoin's the fundamental, you got to get the technology right, because Bitcoin is the base technology and it runs a blockchain, and then the blockchain runs smart contracts. And so you got to have that, like people say, oh, so the bankers all say, well, blockchain's great, but Bitcoin, nothing. And it's because if you're the banker and you control everyone's dollars, then you're not going to want another kind of currency. But all of a sudden, there's a currency that doesn't require 2.5% to 4% every time you buy a retail thing. And it doesn't, and it's frictionless across border. All of a sudden, the bankers are panicked. And so they're going, well, let's just focus on the technology. We know something's coming. Let's get everybody thinking about the technology and not the currency that could put us all out of business. So beware of that. Make sure you're always using the word Bitcoin, because otherwise they're going to say, oh, you really don't know what you're talking about, or you've been influenced by bankers. Go ahead, ask your question.
Okay, well, tomorrow we're actually having someone who is also very careful about his language. Gary Gensler has been very focused on trying to understand when an application is a security and when it isn't. Do you think there are certain applications of Bitcoin or the technology generally where it should be regulated because there is a lot of fraud in the market?
Yeah, I think if it's fraudulent, then there's a problem. But I think this is one of those times that the world's got to go buyer beware, because, and I think that that's what the SEC can really help with, is let's go into buyer beware, and that let's not try to protect everyone from themselves, because if you do, you're going to lose out. So if and saying is it a security or not a security, that's all about that Howey Act or whatever it is. I think that's 1933 thinking. We've got to get into like the 2020 thinking. We've got to be going forward and saying, well, what's going to really matter down there? Not is this a security or not a security? Who cares whether it's a security or not? Let's figure out how to regulate these things. Let's figure out how to do it very efficiently so that two guys and a dog can figure it out. And let's just allow these people to innovate with a big warning message to anybody who wants to buy the stuff that this may or not work out as a currency, because if it doesn't work out as a currency, you're going to lose your money. And if you just send that message to people, then things start getting better. Now, maybe there's some clause to protect the widows, because, you know, taking advantage of old people, I know how they kind of weaken and they go, oh, well, I'm about to die anywhere. Here's your whatever you want. I think there is probably something that should protect them. But I think it's more important to allow real innovation, true innovation, by not tying people to some old law. It's like having a law that says you can't whip your horse. And then all of a sudden they define a human as they define a car as a horse. They say you can't whip your car. Or they define a human as a horse. It's like taking that horse and changing it. And this is not a security and it's not a utility. It's completely different. And we need to it's a currency, let's face it. It's a currency that is either going to be accepted by the people who use it or not accepted by the people who use it. And if it's accepted, then, hey, it hits currency. Once people say, hey, yeah, this is something I'll take and buy and sell, great. And I think the SEC was really good with that because they said Bitcoin and Ethereum are a currency because people are accepting them. We do here at Draper University. We accept them for legal tender, and we accept rent in Bitcoin and Ethereum, but we don't accept rent in name a weird one, Aussies or whatever. We don't accept that in rent, but I still think you know what I think they should be. I'm so glad you asked this question. I think they should be because I'm going to talk to them about this. I think they should be currencies or currencies in training, so that you get these currencies in training, and if no one accepts it, then it's not a currency. It's just like, hey, sorry guys, you who put money into this thing, you're out of luck because this didn't turn into anything of value. And it's like if you're buying a comic book to trade or a baseball card to trade, and suddenly the guy becomes worth, it's like, I'm sure the O.J. Simpson football card dropped quite a bit in value. So I think you have to put up with some major volatility in the ones that are not yet currencies. But as soon as they're accepted as currencies, they should be treated that way, just the way you'd be treating yen or pesos or whatever. And people say, well, it's very volatile. Well, we still recognize the Argentinian peso and the Nigerian naira, and they're completely crazy volatile, and they're volatile down. They're always going down. They're going down, and people still recognize them. So I think these things should be recognized as currencies, and we should just let them rip. But so go ahead, you can mention that to him and say, that they got it right with Ethereum and Bitcoin being currencies, but the rest of these should be currencies in training. Some sort of like, we're building to a currency. We're hoping to become a currency one day where Starbucks takes our money.
So back in 2014, you purchased seized Bitcoin from the Silk Road in a U.S. Marshal Service auction. What are your views on the Silk Road operator Ross Ulbricht's case and his lifetime jail sentence?
Well, first I think, hey, free Ross, but hey, we need entrepreneurs like that out here. Even though he broke some laws, he's done some time. Now most of the laws he broke are drug related, and drugs in most states are legal. So, he traded the platform. I don't know. I don't know enough of the case, but actually, you guys, I hope you learn about that case, and I hope you can get the guy out of jail because I think he got sort of hoodwinked. But the other part is that it was great that the U.S. Marshal's Office recognized Bitcoin as a currency because they traded it for another currency, dollars. And so that was the beginning of like, hey, this has got to be for real so I think that could be something the U.S. government could do is anoint various currencies. As time goes on, there's one, okay, we're going to accept this one as a currency. And maybe there's something that they have to do before they become a currency. Maybe there's a step function. And maybe it's, you can use this in a small way, you get to be used bigger. I think that could be a way of, if you have to regulate the stuff, you're still up against Malta, who has it completely unregulated and lets it rip. So you don't want to lose the whole marketplace to other countries, but you won't lose much. U.S. right now, it's sort of a critical time. They are at risk of losing their dominance in new technologies. And it's on the edge. And how the regulators behave and how light a touch it is will determine whether we keep that dominance. You know, regulation is kind of a luxury, and it's a luxury for the countries that are super rich and they can spread the wealth and they can do extraordinary things, and then they can start putting in these regulations, keep everyone safe and all that. But if you no longer have, you know, world dominance the way we did in technology, by every new regulation that's added to technology is damaging the potential for that country to succeed in the future. And by the way, the politicians won't care, because you put the regulation in now, it only affects the country like 10 to 20 years from now, and that could be like 3 re-election campaigns or something. So the politicians are all short-term thinking. I am always thinking very long-term. I'm always thinking 20 to 40 years from now. Maybe that's not long-term for some of you, but 20 to 40 years from now, what will the world look like, and what are the dynamics? And a lot of those dynamics will be driven by the decisions, the decisions and the withholding of decisions, like non-regulating, that the regulators do today.
Okay, so shifting gears a little bit, it was recently reported in the news that Facebook is seeking to create its own stablecoin to let users transfer money on its WhatsApp messaging app and for remittances. It was reported you met with Facebook as a potential investor in the project. Could you tell us a little bit about it and whether you see potential in the project?
Well, I'm glad you said it just that way, because now I have proof that the press is not giving you the right information. And when you read the press, know one thing: they are there to sell you fear. And if you're fearful enough, you'll keep watching, because there's this like weird vicarious fear thing that we all love, and you'll love and you'll watch and you'll believe everything you see, and they'll sell you ads, and you'll just be a victim of the press. I want none of you to be victims of the press. I said to the press guy, they said, hey, Facebook's going to have a token. And they said, well, would you be willing to meet them? And I said, sure, I'd be willing to meet them. That's all that's happened. And we've gone no further than that. And I'm very skeptical of stable coins, because they're tied to something that is governmental usually, or I don't mind stable coins that are like tied to oil or commodities or whatever. I think they're kind of cool. But tied to the dollar, what are you doing? It's like you're going back in time. It's like let's supercharge this horse instead of going to the automobile and watching that just blow by. Because who wants a currency that's tied to some political force that, okay, here's a good example. Let's say you're in Sudan, and you're one of the wealthiest people in Sudan, and the military has just driven you out of the country, and you've got a bunch of Sudanese, whatever they are, notes of whatever kind. And then you go to Greece. Nobody accepts any Sudanese money. So you are a refugee, and you have no money, and you have nothing. And Greece is keeping you there out of the goodness of their heart. Well, what if you had Bitcoin? Bitcoin goes across borders. It goes everywhere. It's accepted everywhere. You can move from Sudan to Greece and start your life over. And you start with whatever Bitcoin you had. It's just, for me, it's just so obvious, because I do so much traveling. But for people who don't travel much, they sometimes don't see that there are all these friction items between countries, and you have to kind of reinvent yourself if you're going to move to a new country. Well, I don't think that's going to be the case in 10 years. I think these borders are going to be less and less relevant. And what you're watching now is the roar of the dying lion. The lion who's about to die gives out an extraordinarily loud roar in the jungle. And so what I'm saying there is that if these geographic borders become less relevant, then the people who control those borders, the people who are the governing officials sucking their power from those borders, are going to scream, or at least some of them are going to scream. And so that goes from everything from build a wall to the Chinese emperor saying, no currency leaves my country. I mean, both of them are trying to live in the old days instead of moving the world forward. Now, both have other things that they're doing that are really awesome, but those things are the old lion roaring, and we've got to make sure that we understand that. You know, a lot of these questions, and a lot of it has to do with understanding people and their motivations. And if you understand people and their motivations, you see this much clearer. You tie it to their money or to their power. So think about the JP Morgan guy and how he wants to, he says Bitcoin's a scam. And then he says, well, no Bitcoin's allowed to be bought by any JP Morgan credit card. And then finally he goes, oh, well, I guess we're going to have to do something. So he copies it and puts together a stablecoin. And I look at that and it's very ingenuous, but it also shows that his motivation is to keep all of your money in his bank because he wants to control your money. Well, the same thing with these big dictators, big dictator of China. He wants to control all those people. He's about to lose all his power if you have decentralization. Well, you want decentralization. It's better for everybody. Think of a world with decentralization. Oh my gosh, without trade barriers, we'd all be rich. The whole planet would be incredibly rich. So just keep that in mind. Keep true motivation in mind as you read the newspaper and they sell you fear, and you hear about a president and he talks about a wall, and you hear about a dictator who wants to keep all the money in his country. I mean, just have an awareness of people's motivation. And I think you're all going to be much better lawyers for it.
So speaking of borders, you've been pushing initiatives to split California into 3 separate states. Does this initiative relate to your goals of getting governments to adopt blockchain technology or any of those goals?
Bitcoin technology. Get your terminology right. It's all from Bitcoin that the technology. So here's why I thought about splitting California into 3. First 6 and then 3. There is such a thing as competitive governance. People move to Texas from here for better jobs, better lives, whatever. And it's just recently that the quality of life in California has dropped so low, and that people are starting to figure out that this government has done a very poor job over the last 50 years. And I thought, why have they done a poor job? And I thought, of course, they have perfect weather and nobody wants to leave and people keep coming. And there was Hollywood in the Silicon Valley and a lot of really good innovation happening there. I want to go there too. And then the government has made it so that when a company gets to be a certain size, they shove them out the door and say they overregulate so that the company moves. And with that, it takes all the middle class jobs. And so we're left with a bunch of people who are unemployed, a bunch of people who are really rich because they came up with those early ideas or were part of the early company. I looked at that and I said, well, how do I compete? How do we compete with monopolies who are providing bad service at a high cost. And that's when I said, we need a startup government in California. And then I thought, okay, I'll just take a couple of counties, we'll create a startup government. Then I thought, well, that's not going to be fair for the rest of California. And so I thought, well, we need a competitive system of some sort. So let's create six states, let them all compete with each other for all the Californians. And so that people could kind of move a block away or a half hour away in any case and go to a different state if they felt like one state was treating them poorly. And then I learned something in the process. I got all those signatures. I got 1.2 million signatures, and I only needed 800,000. And what they did, this is the political group that controls the state, who's basically screwing it up. And you say it's politician. It's never the politician. It is a bureaucracy. They look at the politician and they say, you'll be here for 2 years, maybe 4. I'm here forever. I'm ever. And so it's the bureaucrats. Well, the bureaucrats in California are controlled by the union, teachers and the employee union, both the teachers union and employee union, government employee union. And they can tell all their people to do things to make it very difficult for me to make a change in their government because they believe it's theirs and they own it. And so I did the signatures. What they did was they got the signature counters to decount my signatures and make it look like I had not reached the 800,000. So that was with the 6 Californias. Then I got 3 Californias. I doubled the number of signatures I needed so they couldn't do that. And then, okay, this killed me, but it's going to kill all of you thinking, how honorable and everything the judges are. The Supreme Court of California was somehow manipulated to yank this thing off the ballot the day before it was printed without serving me or any member of my team. They went ahead and they said, this would be disruptive to California and we're pulling it off the ballot. It was totally union driven. The unions drove all 6 of those Supreme Court of California justices to vote to get that thing off the ballot. And so when we opened our ballot, I was Proposition 9, there was Proposition 8, and there was Proposition 10, and in between it was like Proposition 9 has been removed from the ballot for legal reasons or something. It was unbelievable. The people of California put the thing on the ballot. It was ready to go. The Secretary of State's office had okayed it, totally legal, ready to go, and the Supreme Court unprecedentedly yanked it off the ballot. That should be a case you guys should be studying.
Okay, I wanted to ask one final question, and this is a bit more of a fun one. So
by the way, I've heard that a lot of people don't like the word competition. Think of this as accountability. That will help you with it. The 3 Californias should be accountable to their citizens. It's a new way for me to think. I thought they should compete for you. But another way to look at it is they should be accountable to their citizens. And they're not in California. And they're not in New York either. And they're really not in Illinois either. But they seem to be in most of the other states. And because New York has New York City, they know nobody wants to leave. They love it. And they can keep changing. They can just drive laws that continue to help the bureaucracy and doesn't help the people.
Okay, I wanted to shift from serious tones to your tie. So
this is my love tie. But you know that this is my, it says kiss me and intense passion and let's dance and wow now and love you and out of control and be mine and say yes. this is the tie for today. But I know what tie you're talking about.
Right. Okay. If you want.
Because I'm a Bitcoin tie guy, right?
Yes. It's a very loud purple tie with Bitcoins all over it. Where did you get the tie? Why did you wear it?
So I got the tie because there was a high school kid who came to me, and he's a really bright guy, and he loved Bitcoin. And he said, "I want you to come talk to our investment club, the high school." And I said, I thought, okay, I always like talking to young people. And so I went and I talked to this high school, and he said, "Oh, by the way, it's not just the investment club. The teachers heard that you were coming, and so it's the whole school." So anyway, the whole school came, and we had our great talk. It was really fun. And then he hands me a gift, and it's a Bitcoin tie. And so I have that Bitcoin tie, and I wore it all the time because it was so much fun. And his let's see, is it Ra? God, why do I get this wrong? I think it's Rahul Gupta. Anyway, great guy, young guy, really going to make a big difference in the world. And I got 4 more minutes. So anything you want to kind of get to quickly, let me know. Anyway, the Bitcoin tie guy, I was on an HBO show about Theranos, and I was the supporter of entrepreneurship, which I always am and always have been. And I guess I was the counter thing, but they gave, or the counter argument to the thesis of the documentary. But I got somehow they said I was the star of the show. It was the New York Magazine. They wrote that I was the Bitcoin tie guy, was the star of the show, and I was trending on Twitter as Bitcoin tie guy, not Tim Draper, Bitcoin tie guy. So there you go.
Okay, we're going to open it up to the audience for a couple questions.
Okay, we've only got 4 minutes. Let's make them quick. We'll go quick.
Hi, Tim. This has been fantastic. I'm from Australia. You can probably tell by my accent. I've just been in the country for 4 days, and when I left Sydney Airport on Friday, I bought $200, and I haven't been able to spend them because they were given to me in 2 $100 notes, and no one will accept them anywhere. And I was just thinking of the irony that the US government is so anti-Bitcoin as a currency, but it's apparently got people who work here who want my money. I know everybody wants my money because that's what makes America work so well, we notice. But nobody wants my $100 notes. I just thought I'd raise that and just say, do you see the irony?
Yeah, well, it is true. The idea of having, I'm hoping that I can get rid of this. This is a wallet for those of you who are beyond the wallet. I am hoping to be able to make all my payments with this, and just quickly zip the money from one place to another without friction, without having to pay the credit card guy 2.5% to 4%. And if I'm late on my bill, God forbid, it's 18% or something per year. And that is something the banks love, credit card companies love, but we as consumers don't love. So yeah, good for you. Yeah, I'm sure people will eventually take your $100 bills for now, but I think 20 years from now, they'll laugh at you for even having them.
Hi, I love your presentation. I love a lot of your ideas. But blockchain is a technology without which Bitcoin could never happen. And my question to you is, when you're talking about trials for the new cryptocurrencies...
I think you have it wrong. Bitcoin is a technology without which blockchain would never have happened.
Bitcoin is not a technology, it's application of blockchain technology, I'm sorry.
Hey, not if you're Satoshi Nakamoto. If you're Satoshi...
I have to show you the back of my t-shirt, hold on.
When you're creating a
hold
currency...
on, you have to see the back of my t-shirt.
So for
I
everyone who
can't-
can't see, it says
I
Satoshi
can't
might
see
be
a
a
thing.
woman.
You're like 2 pixels.
So my question to you is, when you open in a new crypto, how long does it have to be on trial? Who should make a decision? And if we're going back to centralized decisions, what's the point of decentralized technology?
I like that question. Look, I agree. I think that is I'm just thinking, how do you get the SEC to start thinking, well, what do we do in the case that suddenly we let everything become a currency? You know, what's our job? And this is what I thought might be a thing for them. But I actually believe that there should be multiple SECs so that they have to compete. So if like one SEC doesn't recognize a currency and another one does, then that currency can say, I'm recognized by this group. So I actually think that having a centralized SEC is a problem, and having a centralized FASB is also a problem. There are 2 monopolies that our founding fathers really would not have liked having, because they created checks and balances for a reason, so that we all kind of, you know, there's the executive branch and the legislative branch, judicial branch. They all compete with each other. So we need the same kind of thing for an SEC and for FASB. FASB has a little bit of competition from the guys in Europe, the equivalent in Europe, but still, you really want multiple. And then if they're all competing, then we end up, all of us as consumers end up all better off. Oh, shoot. I got an investor call right now. I'm so sorry. I got to go. Anyway, great talking to you, smart people from Harvard Law School. Way to go. And way to get into Harvard. But by the way, your life starts when you get out. As much as you think everything works, as soon as you get out, that's when it counts. And so don't rest on your laurels. Go do something cool.
Thank you.